We are back. The world is gone mad, but here we are every Thursday without fail to break down the latest UFC card. And this Saturday night, we have UFC 272, Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal. We have Rafael dos Anjos versus Renato Moicano in the co-main event. We got a bunch of other great fights on the card. I put out the back call this week. All the heavies are in. One of the greatest voices in MMA, Sean Sheen, is here. The Welsh wizard to the other side of me, Mr. Harry Powell. Canada's favorite son, Mr. Spencer Kite, is here with us today. And the Polish prince himself, Sean Deddy, joins us to break down the action. Look at this. He gets a fucking shout out from Conor McGregor. And he goes all hip with the glasses. But he's reminding us all of our sponsors for this stream. And that's up in the top corner there above Harry's head. And that's Eat All Real Nutrition Bars. Go and get those delicious bars into your mouths and into your bellies. Lads, how are we doing today? We got a good card. We got a good card on tap for this Saturday night. I mean, I'm excited about it. Do we want to? I feel the rivalry has been covered quite well this week. Do we want to get into that? Do we want to get into the fight? I mean, as rivalries go, I don't really buy into all that. I'm more kind of interested myself into the actual comings and goings of the actual fight when they get in there. You know, I probably listen to too much shit talk in my day where I'm just kind of immune to it now. This has a little bit of personal beef in with it, as there were friends and there's money and stuff like that. But I mean, it's all about what happens when they get in there on Saturday night. And one thing that really stood out to me, Kamaru Usman was on the desk last Saturday night and he said something interesting. And I'll put it to you first, Mr. Sean Sheen. He said he was asked about these two guys, and, you know, he knows these two guys quite well because he has been in with them. He has the last two losses and the last two fights that these guys have had is against Kamaru Usman. Usman beat both of them. Usman spent a lot of time studying both guys. And he said behind the desk about this fight, he says, he reckons that Masvidal is going to be surprised about at how good the stand-up of Colby Covington is, and Colby Covington is going to be very surprised of the takedown defense of Jorge Masvidal coming into this fight. And I'm just wondering, Sean Sheen, what do you make of all that?
Well, as one of the best voices in the sport, I would have to agree with that, to be honest. I'd have to agree with that. Look, it had to be done. Come on, it had to be done. I actually think he's right. I was watching a bit of Dan Hardy's breakdown. It was on BT Sports there last night when I was flicking through it. And I very rarely watch other people. I love, actually, in the last few weeks, I started reading all of Spencer's articles and stuff. And I love that personal touch. Is something, because of this stream almost over the last few weeks, I've kind of been missing. And there's no place better to go down, get to that man's Twitter and read some of his stuff. It's absolutely fantastic. But the technical side of it is something I like to kind of decide on myself, kind of. And I might be wrong. Obviously, I'm nowhere near the level of other people. But when when you have to do fucking 6 hours of podcasting every week, if I was watching other people, I'd be copying them. But that's beside the point. But I was watching Dan Hardy, and he made some points exactly as you said there, like Usman made, about he showed Masvidal's takedown defense, and he also showed it, I think, kind of to bring both of your points there together, when Colby Covington came into the gym at first and the improvements that Colby kind of made to him. And I've talked for a long time about Colby's striking and his ability there. I think he's way underrated as a striker, and because of the politics and because of the character that Colby is, we can sometimes overlook his actual ability as a fighter. Now, if you're a fan, that's absolutely you're wanting right to do that. But if you're an analyst like us talking about a fight here, you need to analyze him as a fighter, and you can call him a prick afterwards if you want to do that. But I 100% agree. The other point, I'm sure we'll get into the X's and O's of it quickly, but I want to make one other quick point, because as I said there, I'm not a big one for the shit talk anymore or anything like that. But for this fight, I think myself and you were talking about it briefly and on the Q&A, you kind of have to. It's one of those where with Colby, nothing's real. But this is the realest thing I think Colby has actually been involved in, because they were really training partners. They were really friends. He really slept on his couch. He really allegedly stiffed your man of money. So this is a little bit real. Like, I didn't realize that. And as you said, Darian, I think it's been told well. I watched the Countdown show, and I actually thought it was very, very good. I only watched it because SevereMMA podcast were mentioned on it, I won't lie. But it turned out to be really, really good. So I'm more looking forward to this, oddly, as two ex-friends and the rivalry than the fight itself. We'll get into the fight itself later on, I'm sure, but I agree that both guys are better than maybe people give them credit for, but I do still think Colby has a massive advantage, which we will obviously get to.
Yeah, indeed. Spencer, what's your thoughts coming into this fight? Do you think that the rivalry, the personal beef that these guys have, how much they know one another, does it play a major factor into this fight, or maybe just a minor factor in your opinion?
I think it plays a major factor for Jorge Masvidal, and that's the part that makes this really interesting. Colby Covington, as Shawnee said, nothing he says is for real. He's the guy that as soon as the camera is done rolling or he thinks he's off camera, he says thanks, and he goes back to being the guy that he was before he adopted this persona. And people have talked about it throughout the build to this. It is a gimmick. He is not this dude all the time. It's the thing that got him in hot water at ATT is that it is a gimmick and he just went too far. Like, you're never supposed to believe your gimmick. You're never supposed to fully live your gimmick. And he has started to. But it crossed the line because it got real and personal with a guy that you don't want to get real and personal with in Jorge Masvidal. And for all of the technical advantages and stylistic advantages that I think Colby has in this fight, there's that little thing in the back of my head every time I think I know what's going to happen that I go, yeah, but this is a focused Masvidal. And it's focused because it's personal. It's focused because it's, he allegedly stiffed Paulino Hernandez, who is not just a coach, but a father figure to Jorge Masvidal. And so I think, as Sean said, you have to, this is one of the few times that you have to really accept and understand some of the personal nature of this one. And I think it plays into it. It's going to be interesting to me, like a couple of fights on this card, to see who can separate the emotion and who can just fight their fight. Because if Colby just comes out and fights his fight, I do think he wins, and we'll get into that. But if this turns into the fight that they're talking about it being and the way they're talking about it being on site, then it can maybe go a different way, because he gets a little bold and a little risk-takey with a guy like Masvidal that can, for as bad as he looked in the two fights against Usman, he is a guy that can hurt you and can beat you. We've seen that, especially against a wrestler in 5 to 7 seconds against Ben Askren.
Absolutely. Sean Denny, have you bought into all the shit talk and all the goings on this week? Are you hyped for this fight?
I'm hyped for this fight due to the style matchup. Like, I haven't paid too much attention to the shit talk. It's for those two, I've been a bit jaded by them, but their styles though are just fascinating. Like the wrestling style of Colby, along with his constant moving forward, constant throwing jabs. He's an absolute terror. And then just seeing what Masvidal is going to do with that, that's where my interest in this comes with. I think it's going to be fascinating.
Indeed. Harry, just maybe we could round it off with your opinion, please.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm actually not super hyped for the fight from a styles perspective, generally, because I think it's impossible to get away from the trash talk, but I do always try to look at fights as fighter A, fighter B, and only then sort of allow the surrounding variables to come in after I've sort of done my technical analysis. And from a purely technical standpoint, I think the fight's pretty cut and dry. But you mentioned before about how is Colby going to come in, and is he going to allow the occasion to sort of allow him to dictate his fight style? I mean, we've not seen that in any of his fights, right? We haven't. We really haven't. The only one that we haven't seen him try to wrestle is Usman, and we don't need to talk about why that is. So I'm not super hyped from a stylistic matchup. I am very interested to see what Jorge Masvidal will do, because we mentioned previously that when it was Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman, we were like, one of these guys knows in the gym who gets the better of who, and I think that it's probably fair to say that if it was purely a kickboxing match, you'd probably favor Jorge Masvidal, right? Really lovely footwork, and we can get into the technical breakdowns. If it's a pure grappling match, you're obviously going to pick Colby Covington. So when you combine those things, somebody knows in those MMA rounds who wins. But I am interested to see how the variables change this fight.
Indeed. And, you know, talking about all the shit talk, the press conference is coming on a little bit later on, and I'm sure that that'll be the cherry on top of the cake when it comes to the shit talk aspect of this fight. But enough about the shit talking and the build up and the rivalry. Let's talk about the actual fight itself. I mean, well, I wrote my preview this week. I felt that this fight is more than likely going to be won and lost with the clinch battle. And that is if Colby Covington can get up against the cage, Jorge against the cage in that kind of clinch battle. It'll be up to Jorge Masvidal to kind of keep this fight on the feet, underhook, whizzer away, get the fight into the middle of the octagon. Whereas I feel Colby Covington will have to kind of use his jab, use his strikes to get into that clinch. But also when he gets into that clinch up against the cage, he will have to drop down, try and take this fight down to the ground, where I feel he probably will be at the advantage there. Sean Sheehan, I'm wondering, what's your assessment of the actual fight itself? I know you kind of see it as maybe leaning towards Colby Covington from what I've been hearing so far.
Yeah, I can not really see a way Masvidal wins this fight, honestly. Like, I don't think Covington's going to come flying across the cage like Ben Askren did to try to go for a takedown. He is worlds ahead of Ben Askren ever was as an MMA fighter. I don't think he'd be standing there striking with him like Darren Till or the other guys who got knocked out by him. But I think the one thing that could win this fight for Masvidal is Kamaru Usman. And the reason I say that is, has Colby Covington changed as a fighter to fight Usman? Like, when you fight someone that high level twice, sometimes it can change you. I always give the example of Woodley fighting Wonderboy. He had to change his whole style to adjust to fight Wonderboy, and he has never changed. He got knocked out by a fucking YouTuber because he's never changed. Like, that happens to people. And if Colby Covington goes in there and he thinks he's a better fighter now than being a pure wrestler, he will lose, and he'll get knocked out probably by Masvidal here. Because if he goes in and he strikes him, although I do think Colby's a good striker, and I do think he can hold his own if it goes there for a time. But if he's confident in that realm and doesn't want to put it on Masvidal in the way he should, he will lose. Now, I don't think he's that stupid, honestly, and I don't think he will do that. But the big problem is the whole drama here leads into the fight, because the drama is about him leaving his old team and going to a new team, MMA Masters. Now, they could be a great gym. I know fucking nothing about them. They could have anyone. I haven't seen the same Colby since he's been with them. Look, it's easy to not see the same Colby when he's fighting Usman, but he had a terrible game plan for both of those fights. I just don't think he fought the right way in either of them. And I've been a bit harsh on especially the first fight previously when talking about it. But I honestly, thinking back about it now, I do think that's the right call. And if he does that again, if he's a bad game plan coming in here, and like, you'd want to be idiotic, I think, to even think of anything but Colby Covington going in there and wrestling with Masvidal. But what if he doesn't? You know, we can't rule that out, because we've seen fights down through the years. We've seen him very, very recently. We were expecting it to go one way, and it goes completely the other way. Even looked like Sinead Kavanagh last week, out wrestling Liam McCourt and all that. We just striker versus grappler, quickly turned into not being that. So I think it's very interesting. Look, Masvidal can get on top as well, and he's very good sprawl and good takedown defense. So don't push that aside. But that's the one point I want to make there. Look, if Colby fights to his best, if Colby fights like the old Colby from a few years ago, he will destroy Masvidal. I don't see this being a contest. I think it's too easy for him. But if he doesn't, if he fights the same game plan he fought against Usman, I think he'll probably lose here.
Yes, indeed. And thanks to everybody for leaving the comments. You know, we might not be able to get to all the questions right away, but we will get to them before the stream is ending. And just one that came in here. Do you think that this fight would have went different had it taken place before the Usman, before both men fought Usman twice? And it's hard to kind of say, but the question I would have for you, Spencer, coming into this fight is, after Masvidal's last fight against Usman, where he was devastatingly knocked out, you know, we've seen what that has done to fighters in the past. Do you think that will have some sort of an effect with Masvidal coming in here? Maybe not fighting as big a power puncher in Colby Covington as someone like Kamaru Usman, but do you think he might be a little bit more hesitant on the feet coming into this fight?
I don't think he will, because he's a guy that's got 50 fights under his belt, and that's the first time he's been knocked out. Like he talked about it, right? I think the only other time he's been stopped by strikes is Rodrigo Dam back in the day,
2008.
and it was a TKO, as he said. I wasn't all the way out, but Usman put me all the way out. And so I think in other circumstances, and there's probably a couple fights on this one, like we'll get to them, that guys are coming in and off of TKO losses, and you think that, and you know that plays into it for some people. But I think Masvidal's experienced enough that it's not going to be a factor. And if Colby was a bit more of a power hitter, then sure, maybe it does. But not that he can't hurt him, not that he doesn't have power, but it's not exactly the thing that you're chiefly worried about with Colby Covington. And as Shawnee was saying, unless Colby decides to just throw the game plan, the smart game plan out the window, I don't think it's a thing that Masvidal is going to have to worry about as much, because the punches are just going to be to set up level changes and to get inside and get into the clinch. And if I'm Masvidal, I'm not worried about Colby striking, because to me, he just needs to be first all the time from the get-go. Go, 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 go. And that's hard to do against a guy like Colby Covington that comes out of the gate at 11 and stays at 11 for 25 minutes.
100%. I mean, one of the best facets of his game is his cardio, and he's going to put on that pace, and he's probably going to put on a wrestling grind with him too, Harry. And I mean, if you're Colby Covington coming into this fight and you want to get the fight down there, how are you going to do it in your view, Harry?
I think, look, I'm gonna make an overarching point here, but my overarching technical breakdown of this is, if Colby comes out and fights smart, it's going to look very similar to the fight against Robbie Lawler, right? And that fight against Robbie Lawler was Robbie looking for one big shot against the fence and never quite finding it, because Colby was high and low, and then he was finding the hips. He was mat returning him, putting a hook in, threatening a half choke that forced Robbie to bring his hands up rather than commit them to the mat to get back up. The moment he got back up, it was back to the same thing, and we were in a cyclic motion for the whole fight. I think against Masvidal, now obviously Masvidal has for the longest time said he's been wrestling with Yoel Romero, and in this camp he's had Bo Nickel in his team, which as an MMA fighter is drastically inexperienced. As a wrestler, has as much experience as you want in a team, right? But the big problem I have with bringing an Olympic wrestler in is it's not MMA grappling, right? And Bo Nickel isn't proficient at MMA grappling. You want like chuck a Horiguchi at you, or chuck somebody in that ATT room who can really, really grapple, whose name obviously isn't Colby Covington. For Colby, as soon as he gets Masvidal behind that sort of secondary tram line and anywhere near the fence, chain wrestling is going to be the way to do this. Chain wrestling and picking shots high, picking shots low. Bringing Masvidal's hands up will reveal his hips. They'll reveal his legs, the back of his knees, and everything that Colby will need to force that fight to the mat. And don't get me wrong, I think Masvidal has good enough takedown defense, not good enough to stop the grappling of Colby. And one thing that Masvidal can keep in the bank is he actually has really good submission defense. Obviously, the inverted triangle is whatever it is. These things happen in MMA. But, you don't have Damian Maia on your back for 15 minutes and not get subbed if you're not a proficient grappler, right? Let's make that fucking clear. So I think for Masvidal, that's one thing he can certainly be confident in. But, yeah, I mean, the way to get Masvidal down is the way to get every high-level fighter down. It's push him against the fence and chain wrestle.
For sure. Sean Denny, what's Masvidal's route to success here?
He needs to stop Colby moving forward at absolute all costs. If Colby's moving forward, he'll push him against the fence and he'll take him down. So he needs Colby on the back foot and just constantly. If Colby's on the back foot, he won't strike as much, and there Masvidal can pick his moments. But if Colby is allowed walk forward, there's very few routes to win there, I think. And just to go back to Harry's point, the man in ATT to link the chain wrestling together for MMA, Mateusz Gamrot.
That's the man. Just because he's Polish, right? Like that's it. That's all we need.
That could be the key here. Absolutely. We talked about the beef. Is it fake? I don't think it's fake. It is a little bit personal this time. We covered that a little bit at the start of the podcast, but heading on and to predictions. For me, I kind of agree with the overall assessment. I feel that Colby is going to be able to set a pace. I think that he's going to surprise Masvidal with his striking, with the speed he can get his punches out, get his kicks out. He's going to be able to open up a lot more. I feel with Masvidal, he's not going to be able to open up too much with a kick game. He doesn't want to get taken down. His key route to success will be in the pocket and will be to use his boxing in this fight. I don't think that Colby Covington is going to allow him to do that. And I think as the fight goes on, it may start a little bit close, but as it goes on, Colby may pull away, and we may see Colby to win a decision here. And I'll move down to Spencer and maybe just get his brief assessment of how he thinks the fight is going to go.
Yeah, pretty well the same as you said. I mean, I think this is, as we've talked about, as everybody has said, Masvidal's road to victory is making Colby go backwards, or at least stopping his forward motion. If you can get him standing still, great, that's a victory. If you can get him moving backwards, even bigger win. But that's just hard to do, and it's hard to see for Masvidal, who, when it gets going bad for him, you can kind of see him decide to wilt and just go, well, this is what the night's going to be. We saw that in the Usman fight the first time around. We've seen it in some other fights, and I think that's how this one's going to play out. I think Colby comes forward. I like the comparison to the Robbie Lawler fight from Harry. I mean, it looks like that. I think it's probably close, as you said, early when Masvidal's fresh and getting out there. But as soon as that wrestling starts happening, as soon as all of that grappling starts happening, he starts tiring out, Colby starts pulling away. I think he gets a decision. I don't think he gets a finish, but I think it's a dominant win at the end of the day. And we all have to recognize that, as Shawnee said off the top, he's a prick, but he's a hell of a fighter.
Absolutely is a prick and an hell of a fighter. As we move on to Sean Sheen for his assessment.
Yeah, look, this one isn't the most complicated fight in the world. There are little bits and pieces, I think it was Harry mentioned or someone mentioned the kicks earlier on, and I'll go back to that Dan Hardy piece again. That if Masvidal leads with the kicks, as I think it was Harry said, that's big trouble. But when he breaks from the clinch after a sprawl, or after he's able to get the the wrist control overhook, then kicking on the way out, I think is a very, very good move for him. After the chain wrestling has happened, then you kick him to the body. You take away that little bit of cardio. I really think Masvidal's attack to the body as well could be a big thing here, because Colby's game is a long game, as Spencer said, and I'm sure the other lads will say as well. And if you can drain that cardio a little bit, throughout the fight, even if you're losing the first 3 or 4 rounds, if you come out and you need a knockout in the 5th round, that's the sort of thing that could pay off for you. We've seen it in the past before. Johnny Hendricks, Robbie Lawler is always the fight that kind of, that stands out to me in terms of that. But that would be one area I would think for Masvidal. But I don't think it's going to be enough, honestly. I think Colby's going to take him down early. Colby's going to take him down often. And even if he doesn't take him down, he will hold him against the fence. He'll just be like shitting a blanket against him, and he'll end up either winning decision or winning late. One of my bets of the week, they're not out yet, but I'm always breaking here. It hasn't won in 7 weeks in a row, but my flyer of the week, 9-1, Colby Covington to win by submission. So there you go.
Ooh, there you go. Put the house on it. Sean Denny.
I'm going to go Colby decision. I don't think he's going to get a submission. I don't think he can knock him out, so I'm going to go decision.
100%. And the Welsh wizard himself can round us off with his prediction.
Masvidal via rolling thunder. No. So look, I agree with basically everything everyone said, and I'll bring my variable points into my summary, and that's that I think out of the two of them, the person that fights with more emotion is Jorge Masvidal. He says all the time that he's a stone cold guy, he's this, he's that. It's not true. He's clearly a very emotional fighter. He fights for his family, he fights for himself, he fights for his team. He clearly has the vibrancy and the way that he talks about the family around him, the people he surrounds himself, are some of the motivations that he takes into those cage, right? Yeah, exactly. All this shit, exactly. So if there's going to be somebody that's going to be wanting to, or is going to allow those emotions to spill into the fight, it's going to be Jorge Masvidal. In all of the build-up, he's talked about being violent with Colby. He's talked about wanting to hurt him. I think that's going to be a problem. If Colby Covington is starting to wrap a body lock on you, or is starting to get anywhere near hips, and Jorge's going to opt for, elbows from a split stance, or he's going to look to try and hit him, he's going to end up on his back, right? And I think the mental fatigue of fighting emotionally, coupled with the overwhelming, drowning pressure of a Colby Covington game, is going to be a huge problem. That's not to say at any point that if Masvidal, as Big Shorty podcasts, if he can work that body game, his left hook to the body is disgusting. And in the same vein, I personally wouldn't kick to the body. I would try and kick at the legs. If you could take away some of those wheels, some of the pressure, the driving pressure for those takedowns against the fence or something similar, that will work in Masvidal's favor. But I think one of the greatest assets in MMA, especially for Colby's game, is the cardio, as we've already mentioned. And I think that's going to be a huge factor here, and I'll take Colby Covington by decision. Boom,
that's it. Unanimous for Colby here, I think. And as we will move on, I guess, to the co-main event, and that's the Battle of Brazil, Rafael dos Anjos versus Renato Moicano. Moicano coming in here at short notice. Unfortunately, it's turned from the Battle of the Rafaels to the Battle of Brazil. I was really looking forward to seeing the Fiziev fight. Hopefully we'll get to see it down the line. Moicano's come in here at short notice. Credit to him. The Makhachev fight was close to happening, or maybe not so close to happening. A lot of talk. I'll go to you, Spencer. What's your overall opinion on this new co-main event?
I mean, as you said, props to Moicano for taking it. I mean, he in Houston, he said, had that impassioned plea after his submission win over Alexander Hamilton that he wants big fights, he wants big money. Just touches down back home in Brasilia, or is on a flight, I think, back home to Brazil, and finds out that this is available, and is like, yeah, all right, I'll do it. So basically just turns around, flies to Vegas, has to cut 20 pounds in a couple of days, and here we are. And it's a great opportunity for him. And I think it's a good opportunity in terms of catching Rafael dos Anjos at kind of a good time. 37 years old, but still clearly game. We saw that last time out. But it's been 15 months, and he's coming off a couple different injuries that he had to have surgery for, lower body injuries too. And so at 37, with the miles he's got on him, this will be his 31st UFC fight. There's just a lot of mileage there, and there's just a lot of wear. And so, yep, it's short notice. It's a quick turnaround. But Moicano looked sharp in that fight, and he made good adjustments in that fight. And as much as RDA is clearly a step up, I think it's a good opportunity for him. I think he's a live dog in this. I still think RDA can be a factor in this division, but this is one of those fights where, for me, it's let me just sit back and watch this one to get a better read of where RDA is. The Fiziev fight was going to be an even better tell of that, because we know what he's bringing and where he's been in the last couple of years. But this is still a good measuring stick for both guys, and I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, me too. And I'll go to you, Sean Sheen. I think, Rafael dos Anjos, you have to give him credit for taking the fight at short notice. He never refuses any fight. He was looking for the Makhachev fight as well. So fair play to him. Going up against someone like Fiziev, you would think he would have been preparing for maybe more of a striking battle. Coming in against Moicano, I feel that, Moicano is probably, he will strike at stages and is good at it, but you would feel that he's going to try and take this fight down to the ground. How do you expect Rafael dos Anjos to look in this fight, considering his age and considering his layoff and a late change in opponent?
It's a tough one. I was actually looking at it yesterday. I was doing a bit of the Shadow preview. It's late in 2020 the last time he fought. For some reason, I thought it was a little bit earlier. So that's I actually think that's massive coming in here, because when you see a fighter like dos Anjos, who, for one reason or another, I think a few people could have a few guesses. He kind of fell off the face of the earth there for a while. And he came back and he's looked good. It took a few years to, rebuild himself, I suppose some people would call it. And he looked good, obviously, last time out. It's interesting to see what he's going to look like this time, because sometimes fighters who are at the top of the world, and have a bit of a downfall, come back and look good sometimes. But to consistently look good is going to be tougher. Now, whether the break actually did him good or did him bad in that case, I suppose we'll find out. I think from the matchup itself, I know you say Moicano's going to take it to the ground. I actually think he'll just try to jab him from Lint. I think he's very good, very long fighter. He's striking. Moicano's one of these guys that sometimes I think he's an excellent striker, and then he comes out for another fight, and I'm like, has this guy ever fucking struck in his life? He's weird. He's one of those guys. But matchups suit him. And matchups like RDA, I think, actually kind of suit him as well in terms of like what you need to do against RDA is keep him on the outside with a jab. I think for someone like Moicano in striking, obviously, you know, he'd love to get him down and get on top. That'd be the number one case for him, obviously, I would say. But the problem with striking with RDA like that is what he's very good at, I think, is coming inside, getting inside. Look what he did to Anthony Pettis. Anthony Pettis has never been the same since that. He's very good at getting inside, landing that big left hand and causing you problems against the cage. So it's a weird one where on the feet, I think both guys would like the fight against the other guy, if that makes any sense. So I'd actually think it makes for a very, very good fight. I believe it's still 5 rounds, isn't it? I think that really, really suits Dos Anjos. I think weirdly it might suit Moicano a little bit better if he had prepared for 5 rounds. But when you were preparing for 5 rounds and you just had a fight a few weeks ago, it's that must be an advantage. But yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to this fight. I was really looking forward to the Fiziev fight. And as you said there, you kind of alluded to it. Fiziev and Moicano are very different fighters. You know, kind of talking about maybe one would rather get to the ground and one would rather the stand up. But even their stand up games are very, very different. You know, we've seen Fiziev with big power shots and a very, very good, you know, technical fighter. But I think Moicano is, Moicano's type of fighter I like, you know, a long, straight jabber. I love that. And I think it's very, very effective when it can be effective. This is the type of matchup I love. I think it'll be really, really good. I can't wait.
It was very effective against Anthony Hernandez in the last fight using that jab. And then, you know, he kind of breaks fighters down. And then we saw in the Hernandez fight too that he did get the fight down to the ground eventually. The big word in that was try and grapple RDA. And it's not going to be easy to do. And Harry, maybe you could break down how you expect the grappling exchanges to go in this fight.
Sure. I mean, the grappling bout between Donald Cerrone and Donald Cerrone and RDA was interesting, right? RDA eventually lost in overtime, which basically means nothing. But I think traditional double legs, single legs aren't going to be as effective as against RDA as they may against other guys. But I think jiu-jitsu specific takedowns, wrapping up overhooks, looking for back body locks and mat returns from there, maybe looking for submissions. You know, like you put one hook in, you start threatening chokes and you sit him down from sort of half Nelson positions or whatever is going to be more effective. Or, as Shawnee so eloquently said, as he is a big, long jabber, if you can force RDA to try and come in, you can look for trips from the clinch. You can look for plum situations and land shots. And, you know, two of the interesting styles matchups where RDA has struggled have been long, rangy guys. Michael Kiesa, long, rangy guy. Okay, he was cutting far too much weight for 155, but long, rangy grappler. If you look at Leon Edwards, not exactly a grappler, but a long, rangy fighter, right? So I think if Renato Moicano has had any time in the last 3 days to go back and have a little look at those fights, he could definitely take things from those fights to use against RDA. And I think for me, I mean, one of the huge things in MMA, modern MMA, is range. And I think if RDA controls the range, whether that be in the striking positioning or the grappling, then RDA will absolutely take this. But if Moicano can use that jab and force grappling exchanges when he wants them and how he wants them rather than traditionally, I think he'll have success.
Yeah, big time. Sean Denny, how do you think the fight is going to go overall? Who do you have for the win?
I'm sort of picking RDA. I think it's going to be a ring rust versus jet lag type of fight. See who's affects them most. But I think RDA, he's had the full camp. He's had a bit of time off to heal up. But Moicano, like a 19-hour flight and then having to go in straight into a weight cut and then having to try and last 25 minutes with a veteran like RDA. I think RDA is going to use every veteran trick in the book to zap down Moicano's strength pretty early, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him use that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and get a sub himself, maybe round 4-ish.
Yeah, I would kind of tend to agree with that. Sean Sheen, a quick prediction from you on how this fight will go.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I think Dos Anjos will win. What did I give him my predictions? It's one of those ones where I actually think Moicano has a better chance maybe than people are giving him credit for. I think he's a very, very good fighter. I'm a big fan of his, and I'm not at all sure where RDA is in his career at this point. But I will go just about for RDA. I think he can get inside. I think he can land big shots. And I think he'd probably win late, or maybe a decision.
Spencer?
I'm with Daniel Edwards in the comments. I suck at picking Moicano fights as well. I think I got the last one right, but that's about the only one I can remember off the top of my head. I think the 5 rounds plays a factor. I think the full camp plays a factor. Like Shawnee said, I'm not sure where RDA is at. Talked to him before this fight, said all the right things, but anybody can say the right things. But I do think the quick turnaround, as Sean Denny said, the 19-hour flight, the weight cut, all those things just add up against Moicano, who should be game early. But the later this gets, I think the more we see kind of RDA use that guile, use that savvy, and get himself a victory.
Yeah, I amateur hour over here didn't realize that was over 5 rounds. That caught me out. So I went for Rafael Dos Anjos decision, but I think those 2 championship rounds, if you want to call them that, rounds 4 and round 5, I think with the short notice for Moicano, he might struggle to get out of those rounds for me. And we'll send it over to Harry for his quick assessment of this fight and his prediction.
So I'm going to take RDA. I took RDA before, but I really am not confident in that pick. I think everything that everyone said is absolutely valid, and I think those are incredibly important variables. But we also have to think that Renato Moicano isn't cutting. He's cutting a lot of weight, but he's not cutting to 145 anymore. And at 155, he's looked far, far better. So I think that's an interesting wrinkle to the fight too, is he's had a really good streak at 155. I think the styles matchup favors Moicano, but I think because of the other, in my opinion, I think in all the other variables, we're probably going to see an RDA decision here. That's what I think.
Yeah, this is the kind of fight that I would absolutely love to see when these 2 guys are coming off full camps. And yeah, I just don't think that we're going to get a true reflection on how this fight will go because of the short notice for Moicano. And that brings us on to the next fight in the featherweight division. And that's a fight between Edson Barbosa and Bryce Mitchell, a fight that I'm really looking forward to. Bryce Mitchell came out and he said a lot of shit this week, but I'm not going to concentrate on that. But he came out and said that, he doesn't consider it a striker versus grappler fight, but I definitely consider this a striker versus grappler fight. Like, I mean, you're talking about one of the most lethal strikers that we've seen inside the octagon. And, we're talking about a really, really effective grappler in Bryce Mitchell as well. And I don't see for any fathom of this fight that Bryce Mitchell is going to want and stand and trade with Edson Barbosa. Spencer, give us your thoughts on this fight.
I mean, he may not see it as striker versus grappler, but he sure as shit should, because, I mean, you look, I tweeted it out yesterday. You look at the resume that Edson Barbosa has in the UFC, and for anybody that wants to say, well, he's only 3-7 in his last 10 fight, look at who he's fought. That's all you need to do to understand how good this man is, how dangerous this man is. The highlights are there. We've all seen them. The Beneil Dariush knee, poor Terry Edom, just immortalized forever with that kick. This to me is Bryce Mitchell's big test. I appreciate the brashness of saying it's not striker versus grappler, and I want to show him a well-rounded fighter. Go out and do what you do best, young man. Like, get out there, play to your strengths. I think we're getting back into a point in MMA, and I hope we're getting back into a point in MMA, maybe not of specialists, but of people understanding what they do best and playing to their strengths. We see it with Colby Covington. I want to see it here with Bryce Mitchell, because if he can go out and impose that grappling on a guy like RDA, who's been in there with great grapplers, who has shown good takedown defense at times, not great, but is a guy that can make you pay if you're sloppy coming in, is a guy that's going to make you pay every minute that you're standing with him. If he can go in there and impose his will and look as good as he has in some of these fights, that says a lot about him going forward in this division and coming off a year off. He had hand surgery. He's been out since that fight against Andre Fili. If he can go out there and put a good performance together against a guy that's as established as Edson Barboza, that moves him forward and makes him somebody we really have to consider going forward. So play to your strengths, dance with the girl that brought you, and get out there and try to wrestle this man on Saturday night.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned, do you want to come in there, Sean?
Yeah, I think the girl that brought Bryce Mitchell was probably his first cousin, but sure.
Oh, that's class.
Go on, Ian.
Look at why I done completely distracted after that comment now. You're after completely throwing me off.
Wrap it up, lads. We're fucking done it. Wrap it up.
The voice that MMA
Spencer mentioned, Bryce Mitchell's last opponent, and that was Andre Touchy-Feely, and kind of feeds into that Sean's last comment there. But compare that opponent to Edson Barboza coming in here, Sean. Getting a little bit older. I believe he's 36 now. He's been around the block. He's been up there with some really, really good fighters. Do you think that this is probably a big step up for Bryce Mitchell, or do you think it's a fair step up considering where Barboza is at in his career?
Is it me or the other Sean? I think it is. Look, it's a fair step up, but it's a step up that he needs to take. Like, if you beat Andre Fili, if you beat Charles Rosa, if you beat Bobby Moffett, Matt Sales, looking at his record here, and you go to 14-0, and you're ranked in that division, you need to be stepping up. You need to fight someone like Edson Barboza. And as we have seen with Edson Barboza, he will fight those guys. He will fight all comers. Look at his record. Chikadze, Burgos, Amir Khani, Ige, Felder, Gaethje, Hooker, Lee, Nurmagomedov, Dariush, Melendez, Pettis, Ferguson, Felder. I'm not even leaving ones out here. These are all in a row. Michael Johnson, Bobby Green, Evan Dunham, Donald Cerrone, Danny Castillo. And then it kind of falls off. But fuck me. Look at that. I didn't leave anyone out there. There was no fucking, number 77 ranked lightweight in the middle of that there anywhere. This is what this guy is, right? And you ask him, who's next up? Is it this guy? That you can guarantee that guy is going to be a good fighter, whoever is fighting next against Edson Barboza. And you know what else? You can guarantee Edson Barboza is a good fucking fighter as well. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. I think, look, if I could make one point here, I'll let the other people talk about the fight. I think we need to respect fighters like Edson Barboza, right? Who's never going to be a champion, never was a champion, never going to put a 10-fight win streak together. He mightn't even win, 4 out of 5 that often in his career. But he gets in there, he fights everyone, he makes it fun. He refuses to lose in lots of different ways, even though he might lose in the end. But he goes in there against Habib, he almost knocks him out in the 3rd round after being dominated. He runs around, gets away from him, lands his shots. He's game as hell. He goes down a weight, takes time, looks good. This guy is a legend of the sport. I love it. Like, we need fighters like this in MMA. We've had them down through the years. You always hear about guys like who were watching Pride back in the day, or the early days of the UFC, talking about Igor Vorchanchin or whoever it might be, back in the day, their favorite fighter. Edson Barboza should be people's favorite fighter today. You can have your McGregors, you can have your Habibs, you can have your John Joneses, you can have your Israel Adesanyas, but without the likes of Edson Barboza, we wouldn't have much to look forward to in these cards. We wouldn't have much depth in these cards. Massive respect to Barboza. Massive fan of Barboza, and I'm looking forward to the fight this weekend, even if he is, fighting a fucking idiot. But Bryce Mitchell is a good fighter as well.
Great. Yeah. Unreal. That's what I'm talking about right there. And
fucking voice.
You're dead right, because Edson Barboza, all the way back to that knockout from Terry Etim, we've to come out and strike with such ferocity in each fight, and going in against the best of the best in the lightweight division, and now coming in and going up against the best in the featherweight division. Bryce Mitchell may not be the best, but this is I see this fight as more of a testament to where Edson Barboza is in his career right now, more so than a coming of age of Bryce Mitchell. Because if Edson Barboza comes in here and is anywhere close to his best, he stuffs the takedown and he absolutely tortures Bryce Mitchell on the feet for me. I mean, Harry, do you have that same opinion, or what way are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm with you. And I mean, fuck the fight. Who cares? Let's fucking talk about Edson Barboza some more. To me, one of the great things about this card is it's a celebration of guys like RDA and guys like Edson Barboza, who are kind of one and the same in that they'll take whoever the fuck you put in front of them. They're not going to complain, and they're going to fight their absolute heart out. They might lose. They might never put 10-fight win streaks together, but they are in there to the absolute death every single time. And as Shawnee Podcast has rightfully said, you don't get guys like that. You don't have the UFC unless there are guys like that who are willing to trade brain cells and blood and tears and skin and everything for this game. In terms of the fight itself, Bryce Mitchell can say what the fuck he wants. The moment that Edson Barboza lands that first leg kick, it's done. Striking exchanges are done. Nobody wants to take those leg kicks. Nobody wants to take those elbows. And I think that, I mean, essentially everyone's already said, we've watched Barboza so much, I can't tell you anything new about him. Everything you need to know are in those fights, wins and losses. This is a big test for Bryce Mitchell. We are going to see whether he's destined for the higher echelons of the rankings, to steal Graham's phrase, or whether he's going to stick around where he is. We know he's a dominant grappler, but what happens if he can't get a takedown? What happens if he gets buzzed on the way in? What happens if he tries to tie clinch with Edson? What happens if Edson can split that stance and push him away a little bit and damage him a little bit with those kicks? What happens? We're going to see. And Daniel in the comments has said that big experience for Barboza. No, not that one. Bryce can stay at the end of shots and grapple when he sees the opportunity. Bryce staying at the end of shots is the stupidest thing that he could do. You give Edson Barboza time and space to work and you are fucked. So Bryce needs to close the distance very quickly. He needs to push Edson back, even though one of Edson's strengths is fighting and throwing strikes on the back foot. That guy has a switch kick from absolute fucking hell. So this is a test to see if Bryce Mitchell can walk through the fire. And if he can, we've got a fighter on our hands.
We abso-fucking-lutely do, and I can't wait for it. Let's just do a quick round. We'll start with Sean Denny and his quick thoughts on this fight. Just give some quick predictions on what we're going to see.
Yeah, for me, to piggyback off Sean Sheehan, Barboza is what makes a champion. If you can get through him, he'll build you into. He's that tough guy you have to be to get there. If you can't beat a Barboza, you can't be a champion. In this one, I think if he catches the leg kick early, I think he'll do it. But if there's an early takedown, he's going to struggle. It might end up being like the Khabib fight where he sort of looks demoralized going through the wrestling. But for me, it might be Mitchell 2-1.
Yep, indeed. I think myself that Barboza is probably going to stuff the takedown for as long as possible. He probably win the earlier rounds. Could see maybe Mitchell taking a round or two, but it's always going to be up to Mitchell to stay trying and taking Barboza down in this fight. Keep on that wrestling. Don't stand up with Barboza in this fight for the life of you. I think he'll get destroyed if he decides to do that. I'm interested to see what Bryce Mitchell can bring to the table here. But I really do think that that Barboza is going to get the win here, either by late knockout or by decision. Sean Sheehan.
I was just pulling up the SevereMMA picks. I think Barboza will get it done early. I feel like he's going to catch a knee on the way in. Is Bryce Mitchell? I think he's going to knock him out. I think he's going to spark him, and I'm going for Edson Barboza. I don't know why. I'm a bit of a Barboza love fest this week. I just really, really like him. I might be wrong. I might be wrong. Who gives a fuck? I'm going for Edson Barboza to win. It'll be fun if he does. If he doesn't, he's probably just going to lay on him, like he fucking lays on an alligator out the back or something. So, no, that's no good to me. I'm going for Barboza knockout.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I have to agree. Like Barboza, I don't think it's Barboza's time yet. Spencer, how are you feeling about this fight?
I can't go against Edson Barboza here. Like I just can't. I love the guy too much. The reason I love doing this show is for all the passion you guys have talked about one of my favorite fighters with in this segment. I can't pick against him. I think even just from a technical and stylistic standpoint, I think there are opportunities for him to win. As Harry said, if Bryce Mitchell comes out and stands there even for 30 seconds, he's eating 2 or 3 calf kicks that are going to slow him down demonstratively. And that then just becomes opportunity for Edson Barbosa to do Edson Barbosa things, and I want to see him do Edson Barbosa things. Team Barbosa all the way.
Harry, I'm sure you're the same thing, given what you said. You fancy a Barbosa win here?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's War Barbosa. I think we're about to see Bryce Mitchell looking like Chase fucking Hooper real quick. I think Bryce is probably pretty tough, though. So I don't think he's going to get finished. He may well get finished. Edson Barbosa, anything can happen. But I've picked Edson Barbosa by decision, and I'll stick by that pick.
Absolutely, that's it. That's what I like to hear. Well, we've given Barbosa enough love, and for now we move quickly on to the main card. We've only done like 3 fights, and we've gone 50 minutes deep, so we'll have to scoot through the rest of this card fairly lively. Next one on the bill is Kevin Holland, move back down to the 170-pound division, taking on Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Interesting fight for me, Harry. How do you see this fight going?
I can't really tell you that I give a fuck about a Kevin Holland fight, if I'm honest. But I think both guys. I mean, look, Kevin Holland was really hyped up. Turns out he's not actually as good as he thinks he is, or at least what the UFC thinks he is. Alex Oliveira probably has the wrestling chops in this one, and I would not be surprised if we see Alex Oliveira take Kevin Holland down and just hold him there, and Kevin Holland talk some shit, and Alex Oliveira wins a decision. I mean, I'm not excited about this fight whatsoever.
Cool beans. Spencer Kite, what do you think?
I think Kevin Holland may be as good as people have kind of led on to be in that 2020 run. The problem is that Kevin Holland doesn't care if he is or not. And that's the problem to me, is that he may have, like, I think has all the talent in the world, but I think he's, a 10, 15% give a shit guy. Like, he was happy in that fight against Derek Brunson to get taken down and have some fun talking to Khabib at cage side. And unless he's fixed that, unless that's changed, this is one of those fights that he needs to win. And I don't know if he understands that. I don't know if he cares one way or the other. And that's dangerous. Cowboy Oliveira is a guy that, again, it's that bar. We know what it means to beat him. We know what you have to be to beat him. I don't know that Kevin Holland cares if he gets a win. And that makes this an interesting fight to me. But it's all because Kevin Holland needs to show me something.
100%. If you scroll if you scroll and see some of my older tweets, you'll see me saying that Kevin Holland is close to either getting a number 1 contender fight or challenging for a title. He that in that 2020 run, I honestly felt that way, and I know you felt that way too, Sheen. For a little spell
I was a fucking idiot as well. The two of us were together. Me, you, and fucking Bryce Mitchell, the 3 biggest dopes in fucking MMA.
Get the guns. Get the guns quick.
Yeah, fucking Egypt. But yeah, Kevin, I agree with Spencer though. If he wanted to be good, he could be good. I actually normally, if this was any normal fighter, I would say, look, stop the bollocks and just fight properly. But I feel like Kevin Holland, there's just, I don't know how to say this in a politically right way, but I think there's something wrong with him a little bit. That I wish I could say this in a very respectful way, but I just don't. I think there's something, he has a mental issue that he just cannot do it. And maybe that's something that you can fix or something. I don't know. He's done it in the past, but I feel like Kevin Holland thinks he's one of those guys that needs to think. Kevin Holland is one of those guys that I was watching, I don't know what the fucking show was. Julia Roberts was on this Netflix ad for an American football team. Have you seen that? And she goes to the lad, it's like, you treat him like the guy who punched me or something, and then he just runs forward and kills you. That's what Kevin Holland needs. Kevin Holland needs to go out, go straight forward and punch the shit out of that guy. Do nothing but think about punching, kicking, fucking choking out, wrestling. Just non-stop go. If you get tired after fucking 90 seconds, all well and good. Andy Cole was a great example of it. There's loads of soccer players down through the years. Where am I going with this one? You're probably saying, if they're given a second to think, they're useless, right? They're useless. But if the ball comes across to Andy Cole, he doesn't have a second to think. He just hits it. He'll knock into the back of the net. If Andy Cole's running in, same with Marcus Rashford these days, same with loads of different people. If they're running in 30 yards out, that ball is hitting fucking Rose Ed rubbish. Kevin Holland's the same. If he has a second to think, he will think, and his mind will go everywhere, and he just won't be able to concentrate on the fight. But if he can go straight forward, blast that ball into the back of the fucking net. He's a very, very good fighter. I just don't know if he has the ability to do that. The one thing I do think, though, is if Oliveira strikes with him, I feel like he could be in that sort of fight. But the problem is I think Oliveira is good enough to push him against the cage and make it a dirty sort of fight. Oliveira, correct me if I'm wrong, lads, but he's fought down at 155, hasn't he? Kevin Holland's fought up at 185. That's a big difference in size between them. I don't think Kevin Holland's necessarily wasn't necessarily a small 185er either. I'm sure he'll be able to make the weight and everything, but I think that might be an issue. And if Kevin Holland can kind of push him off, let his hands go, I look, he'll probably win if that happens. I just can't back Kevin Holland right now. I don't think anyone can. You just can't back Kevin Holland until you see change, until you see improvements in the wrestling. I actually don't even think it's the wrestling that much. I think it's the mentality more than anything else. But when we see it, if we see it, Kevin Holland still could be a very good fighter. Me and Bryce Mitchell could be geniuses, Ian. Well, two of us anyway. And we will be a big, we'll see a big change in the future.
Absolutely. Only on SevereMMA will you see a reference of Julia Roberts and Andy Cole in the description of a fight. And that's why he is labeled the voice of mixed martial arts, folks. I mean, for me, I have to agree with everything that Sean said. I saw flashes of brilliance with Kevin Holland. And that got me excited, but I just don't think he has the mentality over prolonged periods of time. I think in this particular fight with Cowboy Oliveira, I think the most important part of the fight is going to be the first 2 minutes and a half of the first round. I think until Cowboy manages to get inside the distance and initiate the grappling, that's where we're going to see his trouble for Holland. But if Holland can get off those strikes, or if he can catch Cowboy on the way in, we might see an early knockout. But I feel the longer this fight goes, it's going to go in favor of Cowboy Oliveira. Harry, how do you feel how is Cowboy? Do you think Cowboy is just going to come in here, take the fight down straight away, or do you think he's going to be brazen enough to maybe try and stand and bang with Holland for spells?
No, I mean, look, my more serious technical analysis is, as I completely agree with Sean, that actually it's a mental deficiency that Holland just can't seem to focus and concentrate in fights, and it feels as though Holland has grown up watching the Diaz brothers and Rampage Jackson. Right, he just wants to stand in the cage and look flashy and look amazing and dominate his opponents and shit talk and look great, but isn't quite willing to acquire the skills necessary to do those things, and not quite. He seems that he sees the shit talking as an attribute rather than just a natural expression of who he is. And I may be absolutely wrong, but that's how I feel. I think the weight is interesting because Oliveira is a thick boy. You know, he is a thick boy, and I think Kevin Holland will be larger, but I don't think he'd be drastically larger. But if I'm Oliveira, come in, feel out the feet, feel it out. Let's see it. Kevin Holland has power, but not insane knockout. I don't want to get touched by half a strike sort of power. So Oliveira might come in and then force Kevin Holland. But Oliveira is an athlete. He's happy to bull rush guys. He's happy to make big leaps forward. And I think if that happens and Kevin Holland's back touches the fence frequently, it's very likely to be an Oliveira decision.
100%. Sean Denny, who do you think is going to win this fight real quick?
I think it's going to be Holland comfortably, purely for the reason is I don't trust Oliveira to be able to get a win. For similar reasons why people think Holland mightn't. He's not great anymore. Probably spent too much time having kids later years that have drained him. But I just don't trust Oliveira getting a win. I think Holland knockout probably first 2 rounds.
Yeah, indeed. On to the final fight of the main card, and that's between Spivak and Greg Hardy. I mean, I don't know. I think the only thing I want to see in this fight is Spivak absolutely murder Greg Hardy in round 1, for Greg Hardy to be cut from the UFC, and for this whole joke of agreement between Greg Hardy and the UFC to kind of come to a close. I don't know why Greg Hardy is still on the main card. I think, you're looking at the likes of Marina Rodriguez, who's fighting on the undercard, who we might talk briefly about later on. I think she deserves the right to be on this main card ahead of Greg Hardy. But, it's not Sergey Spivak's fault. He's here. He's there. He has a job to do. Let's go around quickly and give a quick assessment on this fight. And I'll go to Spencer Kite first.
So I'm in the same camp of wanting to see Sergey Spivak win dominantly. And I think he will. I think he has more weapons and tools. The one thing I will say, about Greg Hardy is, as much as we all hate it, for casual UFC fans, casual MMA fans, he is a bigger name than just about anybody on this card. Like, people still know who he is. He's infamous. It's not for good reasons. It's not for reasons that I would want him to be promoting him, but he's a guy that still kind of generates some interest because we all talk about him before these fights. I also think he's improved over the course of his UFC career. It's just not by the amount that it needed to be for a guy that has his talents. I think if he was somebody that was just as all out and maniacal in the gym as some of these MMA athletes are and some of these UFC athletes are, he could have been something because he has a lot of positives in terms of just physical abilities, right? He's 6'5", walks around at 300 pounds, super athlete, like legitimate super athletic. Played college basketball as well as playing football. Just, I made a comparison earlier this week to Matt Mitrione, right? Meat comes into the UFC, no experience in MMA, no actual fights, but you saw the work he put in, and he ended up having a pretty good UFC career, all things considered. He got into the top 10, played to his strengths, figured out what he needed to do. If Greg Hardy had done any of that, he becomes really interesting, but he hasn't, and he showed up at fight week this week at 295, and says like, oh, it's usually 290, and he hasn't missed weight, so more power to him. Good on him for being able to get down there. But like, just one of those guys to me that if he had committed himself, if he had really put into it, would have been interesting. As it is, he hasn't. I hope to see him lose a third straight fight. I hope it's a finish. I think this is his last fight of his contract, and I would be really surprised if he does catch a third straight loss if the UFC brought him back.
Yeah, indeed. Do you think Spivak, Sean, Sheen is going to come in here and look to take the fight down and maybe get him out of there pretty early? I think that's the route to victory that I can see him taking for sure.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, he probably will. Like, it's difficult to know at heavyweight a lot of the time, but when you're fighting Greg Hardy and he doesn't seem to have much of a ground game and does have big knockout power, you're probably right. Like, Greg Hardy's been hit a fair few times in the early days of his career as well, so it's not exactly like he can't be gotten to on the feet. But I think Spivak will do that. As Spencer said there, like, I watched a few Greg Hardy. I remember watching Greg Hardy fights a few fights ago and thinking, right, obviously everyone maybe apart from Spencer and maybe Ian a little bit as well, wouldn't know that much about Greg Hardy in terms of, we've obviously heard about it because he came into MMA. But when you see someone, like the Colby Covington thing earlier, as just a pure athlete, as just a pure fighter, there's reasons to get excited about this guy, and obviously they're not just that, so don't get me wrong. But that seems to kind of have gone up in smoke a little bit recently. He just seems to have kind of hit a wall. As Spencer said, I don't know, is it a thing of like he's not one of these demons in the gym? And in that sort of way. But it might be just, he's been training a long time to play college football, to play in the NFL and everything like that. There's only a certain amount of reps in you. There's only a certain amount of times you can keep getting hit, whether it's American football, whether it's basketball, or not basketball, whether it's MMA. It could be that for him. Like, he literally could have come to MMA too late. It could be something like that. He mightn't just care about it anymore. He mightn't like the feedback he's gotten. He might have thought it would be a little bit easier, and he just doesn't have the gumption for it. I don't know, but this is a massive fight, as Spencer says. If he loses this, look, I think the UFC probably will bring him back if, depending on the contract situation. But he really, really needs to win it. I'm kind of splitting it. I honestly don't know. I've gone with Spivak to win a decision. I think he might take him down and and win the fight that way. But hard to test. Spivak isn't a world beater. Like, let's be honest here. And if Greg Hardy can keep it on the feet for a while, he can land a big shot and knock him out. Make absolutely no mistake about that. But I don't think a lot of people are hoping for that, to be honest.
Just a quick follow-up question to you, Sean. Do you think pure raw athleticism can get you a long way in this day and age still in the heavyweight division in the UFC?
Absolutely. In the heavyweight division, without a shadow of a doubt. In lots of divisions, actually, but especially in the heavyweight division. If you're look at Cyril Gagnon. Now, he's a very skilled fighter as well, don't get me wrong, but he is the best athlete we've ever had in the UFC's heavyweight division. And, when I say athlete, it isn't all about strength. It isn't all about power. Athleticism, when I look at someone like him, it's the way he can move on his feet. He's really good cardio, can keep going for 5 rounds, moving in that same sort of way. And look at the success he's had very early in his career without too much schooling. And we saw in the title fight with Ngannou that he is a very, very good striker, but when he gets into certain positions, he's like a duck up a tree, you know? It's a big, big issue. But guys like that, we've seen them down throughout the years, that they can get to the very, very top level. They will lose at the top level, but they can get their best on athleticism themselves. And it's one thing in MMA, if you look at fights, right, you see two guys with the exact same skill set, or maybe a little bit better for one guy. The better athlete will always win, always. Even if the better athlete is the slightly worse fighter. Athleticism is massive in MMA. And before, remember years ago, people used to look at Kenny Florian and go, look, this could be a guy working in an office and things like that. And it was all based on skill. MMA is absolutely a very skill-based game. Jiu-jitsu especially, as Harry will tell you, I'm sure. But MMA at the very top level is athleticism is massive. And at the heavyweight division, it's bigger than any others. And look, Greg Hardy's shown that. He came into MMA and a few months training, knocking everyone out, the amateurs and the pros and everything as well. He made it look easy early. I think it's massive.
Yeah, big time. And that kind of rounds us up for the main card. We won't go too much longer now. We'll touch on one or two fights maybe on the undercard. We have Jamie Malarkey versus Jalen Turner, who is headlining the prelims. Look, at time constraints, we're just going to have to brush over that one, because I'd like to talk a little bit about Marina Rodriguez, and her placement on this card and her matchup for me has really confused me coming into this, especially after the year she had last year when they lined her up really with really good competition, and she picked up 3 really solid wins against Amanda Hebas, against Michelle Watterson, and then finally against Mackenzie Dern. And then, okay, you put her on the prelims. There's more eyes on the prelims, and there is some benefits there. But Spencer, to me, it's not really a beneficial opponent here. I feel after getting those 2 wins to come against Yan Jinan in this fight, it's kind of a little bit of a step back. Would you agree?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. It would have even if Yan was coming in off a loss that wasn't as bad as that Carla Esparza fight is. And I'm somebody that is loath to do the let's now go back and re-examine everything that came before it and put some different kind of revised history about it. She went into that Carla Esparza fight on a 6-0 in the UFC, 12-fight winning streak, and then gets absolutely blown out. A big part of that is that Carla Esparza is a very good fighter, very good, especially as a grappler. We saw a different ferocity from Carla that fight. I think she opened her up with a bunch of elbows and just beat the holy hell out of her. But it also made me go back and do okay, let me watch the couple fights before that. Claudia Gadelha has since retired, hasn't been the same since kind of the second fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Karolina Kowalkiewicz was before that, hasn't been the same for a number of years. The Angela Hill fight, super close. You could probably, I'm sorry, Sean Denny. It's, I love her. She is a lovely, lovely lady. I had a great conversation with her before her UFC debut. She is absolutely wonderful. She has not been the same fighter for a number of years. The Angela Hill fight, can easily make a case that Angie wins that fight. And so you start looking at, was Yan Jianan a little bit inflated by a couple of wins that just went her way and a couple of fair matchups? And to have Marina, as you said, coming off the year she had last year, where she goes out and sparks Amanda Hebas twice in that fight in January, and then has 2 very good main event performances, to put her where she is now is all right, well, keep busy. I know that's a part of it for her. I've talked with her team. I've talked with her. She wants to stay active. She has no interest in fighting 1 or 2 times a year and having these long layoffs. So that's certainly part of it. And this is the best opportunity she could have got. But it's where I would have really liked to see the UFC just throw whatever it takes at Joanna Jędrzejczyk to get her out there for this, or to have had Marina Rodriguez fight Rose Namajunas instead of the rematch with Zhang Weili, instead of this fight, because I think she deserves a little bit better than this, as you said.
For sure. Does anybody else have anything to add on what Spencer says? I couldn't agree with what he said more. Sean, do you have anything to say here? Sean, no, everything all good? Cool, we've covered that. Sean Denny, I know that you were looking at a fight on the undercard, and that's another fight that between 2 women who have a lot of bad blood in the UFC flyweight division, and that's Marina Mirage versus Maria Agapova. I know there's a lot of bad blood coming into this. It's getting quite personal. We have some bad blood in the main event. We also have some bad blood in the undercard as well.
Yeah, this is a big one. Marina Mirage, her first fight in a long time. I think she's had 4 cancellations in a row. It seemed like every time you'd see Marcel Dorf put up a fight announcement with her in it, you think it's never going to happen. But she really, really hates Agapova. They don't get along. There was lots of accusations made about Agapova being a junkie and stealing and things like that. So there's real bad blood here. But obviously, Marina Mirage is from Ukraine. So while she's fighting here, her parents are actually back in Ukraine defending the city she's from. She's from not too far away from Dnipro, which is sort of where a lot of the fighting is going on at the moment. So she'll have a lot on her mind coming into this, and I expect to see her very fired up and ready to go. And just another note, Sergei Spivak is also Ukrainian. So also expecting him to come out firing. So very hard time for the pair of them, but I expect they're going to put on big performances and rise the troops, so to say.
Absolutely, yeah, it must be very tough for before we round it up, I mean, another couple of fights on the card. We got Brian Kelleher versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Tim Elliott is back to fight Tagir Umbekov. Ludwig Klein of Devontae Smith. Just Dustin Jacoby against a name that Sean Denny is going to tell me. Who is he fighting? Michael Ojenchuk.
Olenchuk.
No, it's Oleg Chaychuk.
I got it right.
Oleg Chaychuk. He is or Husar or Oleg Chaychuk.
Nice. Anybody have any thoughts on those fights quickly before we wrap it up?
I just want to know what Spencer Kite's undercard fight of the night is to be honest.
Oh, it's Marina Mirage and Mashka Agapova. I mean, she absolutely, like, they hate each other. Agapova asked for this fight by name in the cage afterwards, and then got to her post-fight media and was like, look, this bitch has been talking shit about me, and I want to smash her face in. And on top of that, I actually think Agapova is just a phenomenal prospect. She may, this could be a fight where she goes out and she's careless and reckless and fights emotional, and it ends up looking like the Shanna Dobson fight, where she absolutely gassed right away because she's just throwing everything in the first 90 seconds. But that fight, and Harry and I had some DMs about it earlier in the week or last week. The fight against Sabina Mazo is just like, I've watched it 4 times in the last 5 days, because it's just one of those fights for me where it's like, this is a fighter that has taken the things that everybody said, hey, this is what you're doing wrong. Stop doing that. And she stopped doing it. She started being poised. She started showing patience. And that makes all of her boxing, which is very good. That makes all of her movement, which is very good for this division, all the more better. And she absolutely lit up Sabina Mazo. The finishing combination is one of my favorite things that I've seen in the last kind of this year of doing tape study to prep for some of these pieces that I write. It's a step off left hook to the body, club with the overhand right, and she's got the choke in, and Mazo's tapping before she's even got the choke in, because she's just like, look, I'm dead to rights here. There's no point fighting this. Let's just get out of here. So you throw in the actual legitimate hatred on top of it, and I am so stoked for this fight. And just on that note, Team Agapova.
Oh yes, we're the allegiance has been laid down by Spencer. I mean, quick roundup. Who's obviously you're excited about that fight, Spencer? What's your fight tonight going to be, Sean Sheen?
Well, I wouldn't know too much about these undercard fights now, to be honest. I'm looking forward to all the top 3 fights. I did a quick video about it over in Sherdog. I'm really looking forward to them. I'm looking forward to seeing how Colby deals with Masvidal. I'm looking forward to seeing if Mitchell is what everyone thinks he is. And I joked earlier on. I apologize, Bryce, and your cousin. But I think he's a very, very good fighter. I really do. I think he's a tremendous fighter, and I wouldn't say anything bad about him. And look, he could very well go in here and beat Edson Barboza and Kevin Holland as well. If you're not looking forward to seeing what Kevin Holland shows up here, you're probably don't have a pulse. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And Dos Anjos versus Carnero, great fight, really, really good fight. As a fan of the jab, I'm looking forward to seeing Carnero doing a bit of that. Maybe cutting up, bloodying up Dos Anjos, and Dos Anjos trying to break that down to get inside. The type of technical matchup I absolutely love. If it becomes that, I could see it going another way as well. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to those top 4 fights. It's a pay-per-view that we don't normally see. We usually see the big title fight or the 2 big title fights at the top, and then a couple of more very, very good fights underneath it. This one is just those very, very good fights, and it's a little bit different, but nonetheless, I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad I don't have to pay fucking 70 quid or whatever it is over in America. But yeah, should be a fun night.
Well, we do, but I gladly pay it. But it's a good night of fights. Lots of stories are going to come out of this. Lots of talking points. Some great fights sprinkled throughout the card. Really looking forward.
Bangers.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. Harry, give us your fight of the night real quick.
I mean, I can't really pick. I think Nurmagomedov versus Kelleher's a sleeper. I think Tim Elliott is never in a boring fight, and neither is Tagir Ulanbekov. I think Ludovic Klein and Devontae Smith might be fun. Jalen Turner versus Jamie Malarkey is going to be a banger. And then obviously Barbosa Mitchell could be a banger. Dos Anjos Moicano is a great fight. I don't think Covington and Masvidal is going to be a great fight, frankly. But yeah, I mean, we've already talked about the Agapova matchup. So yeah, I think I see what Sean is saying, but I genuinely think that there's some great matchmaking on this card. There's some really, really good matchmaking, and we should be in for some absolute bangers.
100%. Holland versus Oliveira for me for fight of the night is spanner in the works, an odd one, but I don't know. I just have a gut feeling about that fight that it's going to be crazily, outrageously exciting in one way or another. And we'll leave it with the great man Jim D, who knows what's up. He knows what's up. We're great for the sport. We're joined by divisive MMA. Sure, it could only be contagious through us all as we get through another UFC pre-show. We'd like to thank everybody for joining in, asking questions, watching along. Thanks to our sponsors, Eat All Real Nutrition Bars. Enter the code word SevereMMA on eatallreal.com. Get yourself 15% off. That's SevereMMA on eatallreal.com. Get 15% off. They're the nicest protein bars on the market. Thanks to Harry Powell for joining me. Thanks for Sean Denny. Thanks to Spencer Kite. Thanks to Sean Sheen. Go and follow all of them on Twitter, except Sean Sheen. He doesn't want any followers. At BJJ_Harry Powell, at Denny Rans, at Spencer Kite, and myself at IO'Neill MMA. Cheers. Thank you. Good luck. We'll see you next Thursday night for another pre-show.